Hi, this is Jack Zenger. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar. We've entitled Ignite Your Initiative, the Art of Getting Things Done. I've always thought about initiative as having two basic components. One is kind of the ability to see what needs to be done. And then secondly, the ability to kind of take the first step and get things moving. Supporting today's webinar will be four people from the ZF organization. Myself and Joe will be making the presentation in large part, but we're joined by one of our colleagues, Jill Mancini, who will at the end of today's webinar be here to kind of give you a special offer and an opportunity. Jill, say hi to the people if you would, so they'll know your voice.
Thanks, Jack. Hello, everyone, and I look forward to connecting with you at the end of the session.
And thanks. And finally, we have Tracy Mancini, who is Tracy Consolini, I'm sorry. Tracy Consolini, who is managing our chat room. Joe and I are not able to kind of keep track of all the things that you say and ask for. And so Tracy is graciously managing that and is very knowledgeable. So if you have questions or requests, she will be able to handle those. So with that, Joe, let's get started.
Well, thanks, Jack. And the first analysis I did, I looked at the data. This is 113,000 leaders, and I looked at the influence of taking initiative, one competency, on this overall perception of leadership effectiveness. And as you look at the graph there, you can see on the horizontal axis is your effectiveness at taking initiative, first to the 9th percentile, and then overall leadership effectiveness, which is the average of 60 items that measure your leadership effectiveness. And what is very apparent there is a strong correlation between taking initiative and being rated as a highly effective leader. Now, I did a second study where I looked at just above average leaders. So these are leaders that are performing above average. And then I looked at that data by age. So on this second graph, what we're looking at is age groups. And then I plotted there, the line, it represents your scores or the average scores from leaders on taking initiative. And what you see there is that at a younger age, you can see the average score for those 25 to 35 is about the 75th percentile. And then, you can see how that goes down. Now, the insight here is that it looks like taking initiative is a very important competency early on in a person's career. Now, be aware that when I say it goes down, it only goes down to about the 68th percentile. So it's still relatively high, but early on, taking initiative appears to be very important. Jack, why do you think that is? Why is taking initiative so important early on?
Joe, I think taking initiative is a pattern that people establish in their careers. And the thing that gets them noticed, the thing that kind of leads them to get that first promotion or the assignment of being a team leader is that ability to see what needs to be done and to take the first step, making it happen.
I remember when my daughter used to invite boyfriends to come to dinner, and I would always kind of look at what happened when it was time to do the dishes. and those that pitched in and helped, I liked. And she married one of those. So it was a really good, for me, it's a good test of kind of a person's character and if they're willing to jump in and help. Now, the second slide here, this next slide, really shows you the age groups again. But now what I'm looking at is I'm looking at people in the top quartile, right? Top quartile on overall leadership effectiveness. And then we're looking at the percentage of people in the top quartile on taking initiative. And as you can see there, the 25 to 35 group, 80% of the people in the top quartile in that age group scored high on, were in the top quartile on taking initiative. And then you can see how that goes down to 69%. So there's two observations there. One, taking initiative appears to be very influential throughout your career, but early on, it's especially essential, or it makes a big impact. And I think it gets you noticed, early on in your career. One of the things that I always really think is interesting is when you give somebody a job, and when they finish the job, they stop. You say, why did you stop? It's, well, I did what you told me to do. Now I'm going to sit here. Tell me to do something else. And why, that is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. But Jack, we got this question on social media, and I thought it was a really good question. Can you take, too much initiative? Could it be problematic?
Well, I think there's no question that this quality of taking initiative is not something that people can have that's totally unfettered. There are times when people go too far. And so we've tried to make a list of some of those elements that might go into having that happen. One is that it goes in a direction that's not aligned with the company strategy, or it crosses into boundaries that are way out of your domain, or you don't get the right permissions from the people who are being impacted, or that you don't involve in a helpful kind of way the colleagues who need to be involved, or that if your motives are perceived as being self-serving, then maybe you've gone too far. And finally, I mean, does it overload the ability of the organization to execute properly? And does it divert important organizational resources from the more important projects? So yeah, initiative is a wonderful thing, but there are times and places where it needs to have boundaries.
Jack, I think one of the keys here is that people do stuff, but they don't tell people what they're doing. They don't communicate. I mean, yeah. They head off and if all you did was just say, gee, I'm thinking about doing this, somebody, whoa, wait a minute. I think all of these things, most of these things could be resolved. Well, on this next slide, what we show you here is the impact of taking initiative on a leader's impact at creating engagement. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked for a manager who needed to get something done in order for you to do your job? We all have, haven't we? And that just drives me crazy. Since I'm in a kind of a top level position, that doesn't happen to me anymore because Jack always gets stuff done before I do. But waiting on your manager, right? Waiting for them to kind of come back and get things done. And what you see there is this connection between the engagement of employees and the extent to which their manager takes initiative and gets stuff done and makes stuff happen. And it's very strong. If they're poor at it, engagement's at the 27th percentile. If they're really good at it, engagement's at the 77th percentile. That is a very strong study there, and that's based on 100,000 leaders. The next study we looked at was the percentage of employees that work for you, direct reports, who are willing to go the extra mile. And what I think we're seeing here is this effect, this imitation effect, because if a manager is really good at taking initiative, that whole idea of an employee willing to go the extra mile, they tend to replicate that in working harder and taking on things. Jack, have you seen that in your experience?
Absolutely. The behavior of the leader is really contagious, and his or her willingness to kind of do the extra jobs or tasks or pitch in, roll up their sleeves, get to work, that makes a huge difference on the people who report to them
Yeah.
and their willingness to go the extra mile.
And the last one is the frustration that can occur when a leader doesn't get around to it, doesn't take care of things. And this is the percentage of people that think about quitting. We're in the middle of this great resignment here and people leaving. And you don't want to give people an excuse to leave. And so getting things done, taking an initiative, making stuff happen, getting stuff out of the way, clearing the path, that really helps. And as you can see, leaders who don't take initiative well are 46% of their direct reports are thinking about quitting. Only 14% are thinking about quitting if you're really good on that capability. The interesting thing is, as you think, gosh, you've talked a lot about taking initiative, how powerful it is. How does it rank in terms of importance? And it actually ranks 15th. So why? Well, I think it's, for most people, it's a given. For most people, they say, hey, that you should be doing that. That ought to be automatic. And so I think they rank it low. When we looked at this by gender, we found an interesting kind of effect here. Now, we found males, their average effectiveness at taking initiative was at the 48th percentile. On females, it was at the 55th percentile. Now, that's not a huge gap, but when you think about the number here, 25,000 females, 49,000 males in that average effect, that actually is the competency that's the biggest difference, that makes the biggest difference between males and females, is taking initiative. Females are significantly, statistically, more effective at doing that. And I think that's a differentiating effect for females. And we found that to be true in the data. The second study here is we looked at management level. And this was kind of a surprise a little bit because top managers are at the 51st percentile, middle managers the 45th percentile, but supervisors actually scored higher on this than top managers. I just think there's a lot more things that they can do. And top managers, you know, they get stuck sometimes. Sometimes it's harder to show initiative in those top level positions. The last one looks at effectiveness on taking initiative by age. And since Jack and I are a little older, we're a little sensitive to this graph, but it appears to go downhill. But then I looked at the top performers, and it still goes downhill a little bit, but not a lot. You can see that it's a more level slope there for the top performers. So Jack, can you summarize this for us?
You bet. Just to kind of just stand back and just review what we've pointed out. Taking initiative has a substantial impact on a leader's overall effectiveness. We hope that's come through in the data that Joe has presented. It can be even more important for people early in their careers. So those of you who are participating in today's webinar, if you're young and early in your career, you might just take special note of what we're saying. We found that leaders who take more initiative have subordinates who are more engaged, less likely to quit, and more likely to go the extra mile. We think those are clearly behaviors that all of us would like our subordinates to exhibit. Joe noted that females score statistically significantly higher on taking initiative. It's very clear that females in the main are being asked to do multiple things in terms of their roles at home and their roles in organizations. So they apparently get better at it. And finally, as people age, their effectiveness at taking initiative does decline, except for those leaders in the top quartile who tend to remain relatively the same.
Well, thanks, Jack. And so this next slide, what we're going to show you is your results on the self-assessment. And the self-assessment looks at preference. And preference is not effectiveness, but it's connected to effectiveness. We actually find that this score here has a significant positive correlation to the perceptions of others' ratings on your ability to take initiative. There's a positive correlation between that. And again, the scores range from -8 to +8. And this shows you your preference. This is your interest in taking initiative and your desire to take initiative. And as you look at taking initiative and you look at other competencies, people that score high on taking initiative get a high score on this. They also tend to get a higher score on champions change, on customer focus, on technical expertise, and on displaying integrity and honesty. So we think this is a pretty powerful assessment at giving you some insight on your preference there. Now, your effectiveness on it is a little bit different, but it's correlated. So we wanted to talk about an example of a person who we thought was really an example of a person that was good at taking initiative. And I thought Florence Nightingale was a good example. And Jack asked me if I wanted this example because she kind of was a statistician, but she's one of my people. She was kind of a data geek, although she really was a great nurse. In 1984, Florence Nightingale arrived in Constantinople to take care of soldiers who were wounded in the Crimean War. And this hospital was only a group of old barracks, and they were dilapidated and they lacked clean drinking water or a working sewer system or adequate supplies. Now, her requests for supplies were ignored by the military. And at that time, people were unaware of the connection between sanitation and disease. So during her first winter, 4,077 soldiers died there. 10 times more soldiers died from typhus, typhoid fever, cholera, and dysentery than from battle wounds. So what she did is, and she wasn't she didn't get educated in mathematics or statistics, but she gathered data on the wounded. And she came up with this. This wasn't a graph or a type of graph that had ever been seen before, but she believed that pictures were more powerful than words. And so these graphs she came up with, they call it a kind of a pie chart. Well, what you see here is the red is disease, the number of people that died from disease. Then these are the number of people that died from other causes, and then you can see the wounded, and you can see that it's really a very small percentage of people actually died from the wounds they received. The vast majority of people were dying from disease that they got going to the hospital. And one of the interesting things that she instituted, and this probably will sound familiar, was the washing of hands and adequate ventilation. And so, this goes back to Florence Nightingale and some of the things that she found in the hospital. She took great initiative and really made a huge difference. And, she has a wonderful reputation and is really remembered as the lady of the lamp, that person that goes around checking on these wounded patients in the night. So I thought that was a really good example. Jack?
Yeah, I find that example kind of really instructive. And yes, I do think that one of the reasons Joe chose it was because she was one of his people, being a statistician, but just creating those graphs was a great act of initiative. I mean, that she would take it upon herself to kind of call that out in a graphic form. Well, the logic for how a person can take more initiative sounds a lot like a Nike commercial, just do it. But what brings up questions like just do what? What gets me started? And so using data from about 110,000 leaders, we compared the best versus the worst to identify what else were they doing? What were the behaviors that the best displayed in contrast to the people who were average or poor? The data revealed 6 strength building behaviors that we'd now like to talk with you about. So again, over 1 million raters pertaining to about 110,000 leaders. So it's a large database, lots of solid data from around the world revealed that there were these 6 qualities or behaviors that seemed to go hand in hand with people who were perceived as being really good at taking initiative. And the 6 of them are displayed there on this chart. You can see the little symbol that represents each of them. And so now what we'd like to do is to kind of go through them one at a time and talk about, what might explain that link. Let us be very candid, first of all, by saying to you, we don't know for sure why a person who is good at driving for results is also good at taking initiative, but we've got some good hunches. We've got some ideas. And so we would invite you to kind of think with us about what causes that to happen. So Joe, tackle the first one.
Well, when I think about drive for results, I think about this really interesting video of Will Smith on a treadmill. And Will Smith he's not on the treadmill. He's talking about what he does when he's on a treadmill. And Will Smith says, if I'm running and somebody is on a treadmill by me, he says, I will die before I get off that treadmill first. I will die, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he is really competitive. But, at one level, I really love that kind of attitude of saying, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna compete. And we've all had that experience where somebody was given an assignment and they come back and they kind of go, I didn't do it. And you kind of go, why? And they say, well, something came up, or, oh, I would have missed my nap. But they usually have better excuses than missing their nap. But it's interesting how those people that really have this energy and this desire and this really driven to deliver, if they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. And again, we all know that there's stuff that gets in the way. We all know there's circumstances that keep us from delivering. Now, some people say, hey, if I deliver 9 out of 10 times, that's reasonable. But the problem with that is the thing that people remember is not the 9 times you did deliver. The thing they remember is that one time you didn't deliver. And so this is really, if you think about it, if you are just really good at delivering results, that automatically pushes you to take a little more initiative, to go that extra mile, to do the stuff that's necessary in order to deliver. And it might be hard, it might be difficult, you might have to stretch. And I think that's part of it, that this desire to always, always, always deliver.
The second thing we found was this quality of displaying integrity and honesty. And I must confess that I scratched my head for a couple of minutes trying to think about what exactly is the link between these two behaviors, having high integrity and honesty, and also displaying initiative. And I think it boils down to a person with high integrity is constantly saying, I need to do what I know needs to be done. So if I see things that need fixing, if I see things that need doing, if I'm a person of high integrity, I will take the first step and begin to, go down that path. I will be mindful of looking for what needs to be done. As a leader, I am responsible. So I need to kind of be constantly scanning the environment and scanning what's going on to see, are there pieces that are missing? And I'll do it right. And that's the key to initiative. So I believe there is a strong link between these two. We know it's true statistically. And I think that may be the explanation for it. Joe?
The other thing I thought of here, Jack, is that sometimes if you lack integrity and you're taking initiative, I start to question why. I start to, why are you doing this? But are you trying to do something? Or are you trying to do something problematic? The next one is about solving problems. And I remember several years ago, I was in my office. I was doing a spreadsheet. I was creating a heat chart. Now, what a heat chart is it's a spreadsheet. And on the spreadsheet, you have kind of colors, and the colors really represent the average scores for people in this case. And so a high score would get a dark green, and then a moderate high score, a lighter green, and then a mid-level score, a yellow, and then a light red for a lower score, and a dark red for a really low score. And so I'm in there and I'm doing this by hand. I'm just taking the spreadsheet and I'm putting colors on the squares. And one of my colleagues came in, Lynn, and he kind of watched what I was doing. Lynn was a computer programmer, and he asked me what I was doing. And I said, I'm creating a heat chart. He says, would you like me to write a macro? I said, what's a macro? He goes, well, I'll show you. And so Lynn literally came back in 15 minutes and he had written this macro, okay? And what the macro did is it automatically went through and it automatically put the right colors in the right squares. This saved me hours of work. Now, I continue to use that macro Lynn wrote to this day. He solved the problem. And one of the interesting things about people that take initiative is they're sort of looking for those problems. Lynn was working for it. He was looking for it. He was saying, Folkman's wasting all his time doing this. I think there's something more valuable he could do. And he was right. And so as you're in your job, there's always problems. I mean, problems hang out everywhere. And if you can be a problem solver, you're going to be seen as taking a lot more initiative. And Jack, you are a great problem solver. You love to solve problems. And I think you do a really good job of this. Anyway.
Well, thank you. I think there's no question that people who are problem solvers are therefore more inclined to take initiative because they can see the way forward, just as Lynn did with creating heat charts. Well, okay, the next thing we found was that there is a strong link between being inspiring and motivating and this quality of initiative. And I think the explanation for the link between the two is that most projects in organizations today aren't things that one person does by herself or himself. It requires other people being engaged and involved. It requires generating excitement and enthusiasm in others. And so this link between being successful, being effective at initiating things is really linked to my ability to be successful and effective at inspiring the people who are about me. So leadership does mean impacting others in a positive way, causing them to act.
That's really true. Sometimes people are like that character in Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore, when they get an assignment, they're going around, oh, you don't want to do this, is that, and
Yeah.
somebody who has enthusiasm and energy for something, that takes initiative, and that really makes a difference. The next thing is champions change. And change is difficult. We all get in a rut, don't we? We tend to I remember a few years ago, we moved offices. And on Friday, we were in our old office, and our new office was in the same complex, but it was about a block away. And so on Monday morning, I got in my car and I drove to our old office, got out of the car, started walking in the office, and then I go, oh, we moved. And I think that's just a good example of the rut we get into. And I was fascinated this year by the fact that we're all kind of frustrated by going home, but then when we went home, we said, hey, this is pretty cool. I mean, the commute to my office is the walk from my bedroom to my office. And in midsummer, Jack sort of said, look, we need to meet together again. And so we started to meet this summer, and then kind of Omicron ruined that. But he saw that need for us to meet together, to change that. This ability to be willing to change, it takes a little more energy, it takes a little more effort. Daniel Kahneman wrote this book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. He wrote about these two systems, System 1 and System 2. System 1 is automatic things. It's that rut we're in. It's that those things we do automatically. System 2 takes a lot more energy, but it's a different level of thinking. And that's what champion change is. That's embracing change, being willing to change, being willing to try things new. And doing that shows a tremendous amount of initiative.
The sixth strength builder we identified was being a good communicator, communicating powerfully. Joe has alluded to this earlier, that the ability to kind of let people know about you, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it may impact them is really key to having your efforts at taking initiative be successful. It's so easy for us to assume that others will just intuitively know what we're about. And the fact is, they often either misinterpret it or misunderstand or don't know what we're doing. So both in the quantity and the clarity of our communication, it's a very key element of successful initiative being exhibited in an organization.
Jack, the great thing about these 6 behaviors is they really help you demonstrate initiative. They really help you clarify initiative. And just this one, you think about things that you do that nobody knows about. It's like, well, gee, if I knew you did that, I'd think you took initiative. Well, okay, communicate, let people know. You're not bragging or anything, but you're just communicating and informing people about what you're doing. And again, these things help. Now, in the self-assessment, you went through and you were given the choice. You voted, this is what I do first, this is what I do second, this is probably what I do last. But based on that, you get a preference for these 6 different companion behaviors or strength builders. And the scores range from -4 to +12, okay? So what that score shows you is the more positive that score is, the higher your preference for that particular thing. Now, a high preference shows that this is something, I kind of like to do. I don't mind doing it. I actually enjoy doing it. And so this gives you as you think about, well, which one of these could help me show more initiative, that preference score is a really important score because you've got passion. You've got energy for that thing. Now, the second part of that is we ask you to rate your effectiveness. Now, this is based on a 5-point scale. The scale was needs significant improvement to outstanding strength, 1 to 5. And what you can see here is your score on these. Now, there's 2 things to be aware of. One is your level of effectiveness and whether your scores are super high, or your level of ineffectiveness. Is there something there that you score fairly low on? If you got a 3 or a lower score than 3, that might be something that might be a fatal flaw for you, that you really might think, gosh, I better improve on this. And we also show you in that output kind of the average scores, and you can see if you're below average or above average on these scores. And these averages are based on the results from 110,000 leaders looking at those same things, and from about 3,000 leaders who we've had do the Taking Initiative self-assessment. So as you think about this, the next question is, so what might I work on? And the first issue here is, do you have a fatal flaw? If any one of these 6 characteristics is something that you really stink on, then you're stinking the place up. You are not going to be seen as taking it. You can't be bad at any one of these, and I mean terrible. But if your score is 3 or lower, that might be a problem for you. And our suggestion is you ought to fix that. You ought to work on that. But if you don't have any fatal flaws, you could just say, well, I'm just going to try to be a little bit better at 1 or 2 or 3. And what we're showing you is if you just try to get a little bit better at 1, or just be above average at 1 or 2 or 3, the influence on your Taking Initiative doesn't go up very much. It goes from 35th to the 52nd percentile. But as you know, we really believe in building strengths. And look what the effect is if you're really good, if you're at the 90th percentile on one of these. Well, your average effectiveness at Taking Initiative goes to the 73rd percentile. If you're really good at 2, 81st. If you're really good at 3, 86th. And if you're really good at 4, you're at the 90th percentile. So our logic is, if you have a fatal flaw, you better fix it. That ought to take priority. But if not, the real approach that works here is taking one of these and building a profound strength in it. That almost moves you to the top quartile on Taking Initiative. So Jack, what should you work on?
So let's think together about what you might want to do in terms of choosing what to work on. As Joe has pointed out, if you do have something that you are really scoring very low on, then that may be where you want to start. But if that's not the case, then what behavior might you improve that, in your opinion, would have a really positive, significant impact on your current performance in your current job? And so just think, which of those 6 would make the biggest impact? And then we always encourage you to stop and think about, okay, maybe objectively, impartially, maybe there's one that would really help me, but there's one of them that I'm really kind of personally passionate and really want to get better at for all sorts of personal reasons. And so you probably want to combine those 2 elements. What does the organization need you to do? And what are you reasonably passionate about wanting to improve for whatever personal reasons you have? So we would invite you just to sort of think about, what might that be? So take a moment and think about which of these 6 strength builders would best meet the criteria for what would make the big difference. We're curious about which one is high on the chart for the majority of you. And so if you wouldn't mind just kind of indicating which of those you're going to select to work on, that would be, I think, informative for us.
Jack, what's your guess? Which one do you think?
I'm going to guess number 4, but
Okay.
number 4 or number 6.
Yeah, yeah, I think that we don't want to bias you, don't
No, don't want to buy. We don't want to buy.
that problem solving, that's good too. That's
Yeah. No.
okay. Well, let's see what we have.
We'll see. Well, oh yeah, okay. 41% said inspires and motivates.
We're right, Jack. 4.
30%. Well,
But
drives for results is also important, and we think that's great.
okay. And a few people even said honesty and integrity. All right.
Right.
That's probably true. Okay.
All right. So, Joe, do you want to explain this to access the development guide?
What we think we can help you with here is just this idea of the resources that, how do you do that? How do you get better at that? And so rather than just sort of saying, I'm going to be better at inspiring and motivating by doing what? And so what we have is a development guide that goes through each of the 6 and gives you some ideas, some insights, and these come out of our research again, on what you can do, some specific actions you can take to drive for results or improve your honesty and integrity or to be more inspiring. And again, these are kind of hard because sometimes these require a different behavior to move forward on it. But we are going to get you a copy of these. If you'll do the exit survey, you'll be able to download this development guide automatically. And Jack, what's this quote from Nora Roberts?
Yes. So we found this, what we thought was a wonderful quotation from an author by the name of Nora Roberts. And you can read it. If you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. If you don't step forward, you're always in the same place. Now, for those of you who might not know Nora Roberts, she is the author of some 225 books that are in the kind of the general romance novels category. And actually, the person who's been in charge of our chat room today, Tracy Consolini, indicated that she is an avid reader. And I'm going to ask Tracy to kind of indicate to us, how many of the 225, Tracy, have you read?
Truthfully, probably about 50.
About 50.
Whoa.
Okay, we're very impressed. She is the first person who was inducted into the Romance Novelists Hall of Fame, but we think the quotation that she has up there on the screen is a wonderful and accurate sentiment, whatever profession you're in. So, Jill, you've now got something that you want to talk with this group about.
I do. So thank you to Jack and Joe and for all the participants for taking the initiative to be here today. We started by looking at the impact taking initiative has on your career and the implications on employee engagement. You then had the opportunity to use the assessment to explore your preferred approach, and the assessment will be open for 2 more days. So if you did not have the chance to complete it before or during, please feel free to complete it once the session's over. You also previewed the strengths builders that you can focus on for increasing your effectiveness and applying that non-linear development. So a lot was covered in 45 minutes, and we're glad you were here. If you'd like to share these learnings with your organization, we invite you to join us in having a Taking Initiative session specifically for your organization. Joe would lead the conversation for up to 25 of your colleagues, and we're offering that at a reduced price of $5,000. And that includes time for Joe to talk to you about your organization and how Taking Initiative will help with organizational results. So reach out to us, let us know if that's something that interests you, and we'll work together to get that on the calendar. Now, feedback is a gift, and in exchange for giving us feedback, we will send you the development guide that Jack and Joe previewed. In order to provide that feedback, as soon as the session closes, you can follow the link that is just been posted in chat, and that will take you to a new window that will allow you to tell us what you thought of today's session. And that is bit.ly/ZF-Ignite. So please follow that link, give us your feedback, and we'll be pleased then to send you the Taking Initiative Development Guide. So thank you very much for your time today. It's great to see you. Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.